Why is one narrow strip of mountains considered the most dangerous border dispute on Earth? Not Ukraine, not Taiwan, not the Middle East, but Kashmir, a place where a single gunshot can echo into a nuclear exchange, where a terrorist attack on civilians can push two nuclear powers toward extinction-level war, where history, religion, water, and pride collide so violently that even the world's strongest nations struggle to look directly at it. What if one massacre in a quiet Himalayan meadow could trigger a chain reaction that kills tens of millions? What if a border dispute frozen for decades suddenly threatened the survival of the planet itself? This is not speculation. This is not a hypothetical scenario. In April 2025, it almost happened. On April 22nd, 2025, tourists gathered near Pahalgam in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir. Families on vacation, couples taking photos, children running across grass that looked untouched by conflict. Then armed men stepped out of the forest. They did not open fire randomly. They did not issue demands. They did not seek attention. They separated the men. They asked one question: religion. If the answer was Hindu, the execution followed. 26 civilians were murdered. It became the deadliest civilian attack in Jammu and Kashmir in over 30 years, and the deadliest terrorist attack anywhere in India since 2008. But the true danger was not only in the bodies left behind. The real danger was what followed. Within days, the subcontinent began to lock itself down. India and Pakistan revoked each other's visas. Airspaces were shut. Borders sealed. Daily gunfire erupted along the line of control. India issued a warning that shook South Asia to its core. The Indus River system, Pakistan's lifeline, could be cut. Pakistan called it an existential act of war. Then came Operation Sindoor. Indian warplanes struck several targets across Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Pakistan itself. The deepest Indian airstrikes in decades. More than 100 fighter aircraft clashed at extreme distances in what became one of the largest aerial engagements in modern history. Artillery thundered in the mountains. Drones crossed borders. Missiles were launched. The world did not panic, because the world has grown used to Kashmir being dangerous. That is exactly why Kashmir is the most dangerous border dispute on Earth. And so, the real question is not why Kashmir is disputed. The real question is this: how did one unresolved border, drawn by a collapsing empire, become a permanent trigger for global annihilation? What often gets missed in global discussions is the scale of the injustice India has lived with for decades because of this dangerous border. India was born in the violence of partition, when around 1 million people were killed and nearly 15 million were forced from their homes. Yet despite becoming a majority Hindu country, India chose to be secular from the very beginning, writing strong protections for minorities into its constitution. Indian Muslims have gone on to become presidents, vice presidents, army chiefs, and some of the most famous actors in the country. This stands in clear contrast to Pakistan, where the Hindu population has fallen from meaningful numbers at partition to almost none today, alongside repeated reports of discrimination and abuse. India was not created as a Hindu state. It emerged as a secular republic with a Hindu majority population, a crucial distinction often blurred in international commentary. From its founding, India's constitutional framework protected religious plurality, allowing Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, and others not only to live freely, but to rise to the highest offices of the state, as presidents, generals, judges, and cultural icons. This stands in stark contrast to Pakistan, where the Hindu population has collapsed since partition, accompanied by persistent reports of discrimination and repression. At the same time, India has faced terrorist attacks again and again, many linked to groups operating from across the border. Its parliament was attacked in 2001, Mumbai was hit in 2008, soldiers have been killed along the frontier, and civilians have been targeted in multiple cities. Pakistan's government has officially denied involvement, even as former Pakistani leaders later admitted the truth in interviews. In schools, Pakistani textbooks still teach children to see India and Hindus as enemies, while Indian textbooks do not promote hatred toward Pakistan or Muslims. Despite this long history, India has shown restraint. After the Mumbai attacks, it chose talks over war. After the Uri attack, its response was limited and focused. Even after 40 soldiers were killed in 2019, India stepped back from full-scale conflict, knowing how dangerous escalation could be. Yet much of the international media continues to treat both sides as equally responsible. Victims and attackers are often discussed as if they share the same blame. Terrorists are described as gunmen, and the word complex is used to avoid facing a basic truth. One country has been repeatedly attacked, while the other has allowed the groups behind those attacks to operate. To understand this whole scenario, we must go back nearly 8 decades, to hurried British lines, broken promises, and a wound that was never allowed to heal. For nearly 2 centuries, Britain ruled India. By 1947, exhausted and bankrupt from World War II, the British decided to leave. But they didn't just leave. They carved. They divided. They drew lines through the hearts of communities that had lived together for generations. The plan was simple in its cruelty: divide the subcontinent by religion. Muslim-majority areas would become Pakistan. Hindu-majority areas would become India. To draw these borders, they brought in a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, who had never set foot in India before. He had no experience drawing borders. He was given 5 weeks to decide the fate of hundreds of millions of people. 5 weeks. Think about that. 5 weeks to partition an entire civilization. 5 weeks to separate families, communities, centuries of shared history. Radcliffe did his best, but there was no best solution to this nightmare. As rumors of the border spread, violence erupted. Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims turned on each other with savage fury born of fear and manipulation. Then came the most astonishing moment. On August 15, 1947, India and Pakistan were declared independent. But for 2 entire days, neither country knew where their borders actually were. Lord Mountbatten, the British Viceroy, deliberately delayed publishing the final borders to deflect blame for the violence everyone knew was coming. For 2 days, the region was consumed by chaos, panic, and bloodshed. When the borders were finally revealed on August 17, hell broke loose. Millions of Hindus and Sikhs suddenly found themselves in Pakistan. Millions of Muslims suddenly found themselves in India. Neighbors became enemies overnight. Ethnic cleansing consumed villages. The largest mass migration in human history began. Terrified people abandoning everything, fleeing in opposite directions. Many never made it. Within 1 year, 1 million people were dead. 15 million were displaced. Cities transformed overnight. Karachi went from 48% Hindu to almost entirely Muslim. Delhi went from 40% Muslim to overwhelmingly Hindu. The scars of partition remain raw in both nations to this very day. Horrified by the bloodbath his lines created, Radcliffe burned all his papers and fled India, never to return. But the British left one final poison pill: Kashmir. Most princely states joined India or Pakistan based on their demographics or geography. But Kashmir was different. A Hindu ruler presided over a Muslim-majority population. The Maharaja, Hari Singh, hesitated. He wanted independence. Both India and Pakistan pressured him. Then Pakistani armed tribesmen invaded Kashmir's western region. The Maharaja panicked. He begged India for military help. India agreed, but only if Kashmir joined India first. Under this pressure, the Maharaja signed the accession document. Pakistan rejected it, citing Kashmir's Muslim majority. India insisted the ruler's decision was legal. Within months of independence, India and Pakistan were at war. The war ended in 1949 with a UN-brokered ceasefire. India controlled roughly 63% of Kashmir, including the populous Kashmir Valley. Pakistan held the rest. A temporary ceasefire line was drawn. The UN recommended a plebiscite to let Kashmiris decide their future. That plebiscite has never happened. Not in 78 years. Pakistan accuses India of betraying Kashmiris by refusing the vote. India says Pakistan must withdraw its forces first, which Pakistan won't do. And so for nearly 8 decades, Kashmir has remained divided across what some call the Berlin Wall of Asia. Why does this frozen conflict matter so much? Why can't these 2 countries just let it go? Because Kashmir isn't just about nationalist pride or religious identity. It's about survival. For Pakistan, Kashmir is their jugular vein, their military's own words. The Indus River and its tributaries flow through Kashmir before entering Pakistan. That river provides almost 75% of Pakistan's water. It irrigates the farms that feed 250 million people. It generates 20% of Pakistan's electricity. 90% of Pakistan's population lives in the Indus Basin. If India controlled all of Kashmir, India could theoretically choke Pakistan's water supply. Pakistan would die of thirst. For India, Kashmir is the linchpin preventing their worst nightmare, a two-front war with Pakistan and China simultaneously. China, Pakistan's closest ally, shares a border with Pakistan only through Kashmir. If India controlled all of Kashmir, it would geographically separate its two biggest rivals. It would also give India direct access to Afghanistan and Central Asia. These strategic realities guarantee that both countries view Kashmir as non-negotiable. Neither can afford to lose it. Neither will back down. And both have nuclear weapons. Since 1947, India and Pakistan have fought 4 wars, almost 5, over Kashmir. Thousands have died. Nothing has changed. In 1965, Pakistan tried to infiltrate Indian Kashmir and start an insurgency. It escalated into full war with the largest tank battle since World War II. Ceasefire, no territorial change. In 1971, Pakistan's military committed what many historians call genocide in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Between 300,000 and 3 million Bengali civilians, mostly Hindus, were systematically massacred. 10 million refugees poured into India. India intervened, defeated Pakistan decisively, and midwifed the birth of Bangladesh. But the Kashmir issue, still unresolved. In 1999, after both countries tested nuclear weapons publicly, Pakistan sent soldiers disguised as militants into Indian territory near Kargil. The ensuing war marked only the second time in history that 2 nuclear-armed nations fought each other directly. About 1,000 soldiers died. Then they stopped, terrified of nuclear escalation. No territorial change. This pattern has repeated for 78 years. War, death, ceasefire, repeat. The line on the map barely moves, but the hatred deepens. Behind the conventional wars lies something darker. A decades-long insurgency in Indian-administered Kashmir, allegedly armed and funded by Pakistan. In the late 1980s, after rigged elections, armed militancy exploded in Kashmir. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, over 1,000 people were killed annually. Civilians, militants, security forces. India deployed hundreds of thousands of troops to combat the violence. Pakistan's former president, Pervez Musharraf, later admitted that Pakistan's intelligence agency actively supported and trained Kashmiri militant groups throughout this period. The strategy was called bleeding India by 1,000 cuts while maintaining plausible deniability. In later years, multiple Pakistani leaders and officials would acknowledge, in interviews and parliamentary discussions, that militant groups were supported as instruments of state policy. Officially, Pakistan continues to deny responsibility as no government openly admits to harboring terrorism. Yet these same groups have also turned their weapons inward, killing Pakistani civilians and destabilizing Pakistan itself. A reminder that proxy warfare rarely remains controllable. 2 groups emerged as the deadliest, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Both are based in Pakistan. Both are designated terrorist organizations by the UN and the United States. Both seek Kashmir's annexation to Pakistan through violence, and their attacks haven't stayed in Kashmir. In 2008, Lashkar-e-Taiba gunmen went on a 3-day rampage through Mumbai, killing 166 people, including 6 Americans. It remains India's deadliest terrorist attack ever. This pattern did not begin with Mumbai. In December 2001, India's parliament itself was attacked, the symbolic heart of the world's largest democracy. The assault brought India and Pakistan to the brink of full-scale war, with nearly 1 million troops mobilized on both sides of the border. Investigations traced the attackers to Pakistan-based militant organizations, a conclusion later reinforced by statements and debates within Pakistan's own political system. It was one of the earliest warnings that terrorism linked to Kashmir was not merely a regional security problem, but a direct assault on India's state institutions. In 2016, Jaish-e-Mohammed attacked an Indian army base near Uri, killing 18 soldiers. In 2019, a Jaish suicide bomber killed 40 Indian soldiers in Kashmir, the deadliest attack in 3 decades. India retaliated with airstrikes inside Pakistan proper. Pakistan struck back. Fighter jets clashed. An Indian pilot was captured. The world held its breath, fearing nuclear war. By 2017, conservative estimates put the death toll from Kashmir's insurgency since 1989 at 42,000 people. Other sources say 70,000 or more. Over 100,000 Kashmiri Hindus fled the valley as refugees to escape the violence, drastically reducing the Hindu population in the region. In August 2019, India made a controversial decision that changed everything. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government revoked Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, the provision that gave Kashmir special autonomous status since 1950. For decades, Article 370 had prevented non-Kashmiris from buying land or settling in the region. It preserved Kashmir's unique Muslim majority identity within secular India. Its revocation sparked outrage and fear among Kashmiris. Why fear? Because without that legal protection, many Kashmiris believed India would encourage Hindu settlement in the valley to demographically dilute the Muslim majority. They feared India would transform Kashmir the way some accuse Israel of transforming the West Bank. And once Hindus became the majority, India might finally hold that long-delayed plebiscite to cement control. India's government argued differently. They said Article 370 kept Kashmir economically backward by preventing investment. After its revocation, tourism surged, jobs increased, infrastructure improved. The world's tallest railway bridge connected Kashmir to the rest of India by rail for the first time. But militant attacks continued. Targeted killings of Hindus in Kashmir escalated. Pakistan's alleged support for terrorism allegedly persisted, which brings the story back to Pahalgam. April 22, 2025. 26 civilians massacred because they were Hindu. The group claiming responsibility, called the Resistance Front, is believed to be an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Their stated motive? Opposition to India's policy of allowing non-local Hindus to settle and work in Kashmir. India accused Pakistan of enabling the attack. Pakistan condemned it and denied involvement, as always. But this time, India didn't just condemn. India didn't just protest. India acted. On May 7th, Indian warplanes struck 9 locations across Pakistan, and Pakistan administered Kashmir in Operation Sindoor, the deepest airstrikes into Pakistan since the 1971 war. 125 fighter jets from both sides engaged in massive aerial combat. Pakistan claimed 5 Indian jets shot down. India claimed 3 Pakistani jets destroyed. Ground battles erupted. Artillery thundered across the line of control. Drones and missiles crossed borders. Dozens more died. Then came the nuclear option, not weapons but water. India suspended the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty, which guaranteed Pakistan's access to rivers flowing through Indian Kashmir. Pakistan responded by suspending the 1972 Simla Agreement, which had kept a fragile peace for decades. For the first time in over half a century, the agreements holding India and Pakistan back from total war collapsed. This is what truly keeps world leaders awake at night. Pakistan is smaller than India and clearly weaker in conventional military power, which is why it relies on a dangerous fallback. Unlike most nuclear-armed countries, Pakistan maintains tactical nuclear weapons, smaller nuclear bombs designed not for distant deterrence, but for use directly on the battlefield. Just as importantly, Pakistan has no first-use pledge, meaning it has never promised it would avoid using nuclear weapons first. The fear is simple and terrifying. If a conventional war began and Indian forces started gaining the upper hand, if tanks crossed borders and Pakistan faced the prospect of defeat, its military leadership might see the use of a small nuclear weapon as the only way to stop the advance. A single detonation, meant as a warning or a last resort. What happens after that is completely unknown. No country has ever used nuclear weapons in a modern battlefield scenario between 2 nuclear-armed states. There are no tested rules, no proven limits, no guarantee that escalation could be controlled once that line is crossed. One nuclear blast would almost certainly trigger retaliation, and retaliation could quickly spiral beyond anyone's ability to stop it. In 2019, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists tried to model what such a disaster might look like. Their conclusion was chilling. If Pakistan fired its full nuclear arsenal at India, and India responded by launching just half of its own weapons, holding the rest back in case China entered the conflict, the immediate death toll would range between 50 million and 125 million people. More than the total number killed in all of World War II. Entire cities would disappear within minutes. Mumbai, Karachi, Delhi, Lahore, Bangalore, Islamabad, gone. But even that would not be the end of the catastrophe. Hundreds of nuclear explosions would throw vast amounts of smoke, dust, and ash into the upper atmosphere, blocking sunlight for years. Global temperatures would fall sharply, possibly to levels not seen since the last ice age. Crops would fail across multiple continents. Food supplies would collapse. Famine would spread far beyond South Asia, reaching countries with no connection to the conflict. A nuclear war over Kashmir would not just kill Indians and Pakistanis. It would put global civilization itself at risk. This is why Kashmir is not just another regional dispute, and why its dangers are so often underestimated. It sits at the intersection of terrorism, nuclear weapons, political instability, and historical grievance, a combination unlike anywhere else on Earth. In 2012, when actor George Clooney asked U.S. President Barack Obama what geopolitical threat worried him most, Obama did not hesitate. His answer was only one word: Pakistan. So where does this end? Pakistan's political system has never achieved lasting stability. No Pakistani prime minister has completed a full term in office, and repeated military coups have interrupted civilian rule, leaving national security policy heavily influenced by institutions that operate beyond democratic accountability. India, by contrast, for all its internal challenges, has maintained uninterrupted democratic governance since independence, with no coup, no dictatorships, and a consistent civilian chain of command. International mediation has offered little resolution. The United Nations has proven largely ineffective, and proposals for Kashmiri independence would solve nothing, as militant groups operating from Pakistani territory would simply shift their operations into a newly formed state and continue their campaign to forcibly merge it with Pakistan. This leaves only bilateral resolution, yet bilateral negotiations remain fundamentally constrained. Diplomatic trust cannot be sustained with a state that has repeatedly hosted, protected, or denied the presence of militant groups targeting civilians, nor with a security establishment that has violated past agreements without consequence. Compromise becomes nearly impossible when national survival, rather than political advantage, is at stake. India did not choose partition. It did not seek the division of Kashmir, nor the decades of cross-border terrorism that followed. It did not create this conflict, yet it continues to bear its costs. And still, India endures. A democratic state of 1.4 billion people protecting its territory, defending its citizens, and resisting both terrorism and nuclear coercion, while remaining committed to constitutional governance and civilian control of power. The world watches, and the world worries about nuclear escalation, and it should. But it should also confront a more uncomfortable question. How long can a nation be expected to absorb violence before its right to self-defense is no longer mislabeled as escalation?